SpongeBob! Leave him alone! Leave us both the hell alone! I was weak. That's why I needed you. Needed someone to punish me for my sins. But that's all over now. I know the truth. Now it's time to end this.
The decent SpongeBob SquarePants, ever the curious sea creature, found himself far from the safety of Bikini Bottom. His latest adventure had taken him to the surface world, where he stumbled upon an abandoned town shrouded in perpetual fog. The sign at the town's entrance read, "Welcome to Silent Hill." Unaware of the town's dark history, SpongeBob ventured in, his usual cheerful demeanor undeterred by the eerie silence. The quaint town transformed into a nightmarish landscape, filled with rust, barbed wire, and the sound of sirens. He encountered Pyramid Head, a monstrous figure with a giant helmet obscuring its face, wielding a massive blade. SpongeBob, in his usual optimistic fashion, tried to offer friendship with a jellyfishing net, but Pyramid Head was not interested in friendship. Meanwhile, characters from the Silent Hill film, like Rose da Silva and Sybil Bennett, were also trapped in this looping nightmare, each searching for their own way out. They crossed paths with SpongeBob, initially skeptical of his presence, but soon realizing his naive innocence could be their key to understanding, or perhaps surviving the town's horrors. The town unleashed its creatures upon them. Horses with faces obscured by bandages, cockroaches the size of dogs, and shadow figures that seemed to melt into the walls. SpongeBob, despite his fear, showed a surprising resilience. His ability to regenerate from near-fatal injuries due to his cartoonish nature befooled the others. In one gruesome encounter, a swarm of creatures ambushed them. Rose, driven by her maternal instinct to protect her son, fought with desperate ferocity, but even she couldn't prevent the inevitable. SpongeBob, witnessing these horrors, began to understand the gravity of Silent Hill. He tried to use his positive energy to fight back, singing his sweet victory song, which momentarily disrupted the creatures but couldn't stop the relentless darkness. In the middle of the horrifying encounter, just as all hope seemed lost, Patrick arrived on the scene. SpongeBob was both relieved and surprised to see his loyal friend appear in such an unexpected place. As they explored Silent Hill, they came across abandoned buildings filled with cryptic puzzles, eerie messages, and horrifying creatures. Along the way, they discovered the town's tragic history and the true nature of its nightmarish reality. They slowly uncovered the town's dark secrets and their connection to the twisted, otherworldly force within Silent Hill. They found themselves facing their deepest fears and confronting their darkest memories, as the town's dark forces tried to manipulate them with delusions and hallucinations. They witnessed visions of their past traumas and faced twisted, distorted versions of themselves, forced to confront the demons within their own minds. They also encountered the ominous Pyramid Head, the enigmatic figure that roamed the town, hunting down anyone who dared to cross his path. The group's encounters with Pyramid Head became increasingly intense and dangerous. In their desperate attempts to escape Silent Hill and uncover the truth, they came across other survivors, each with their own unique stories and motives. They formed alliances and faced off against not only the town's sinister forces but also each other, as fear and suspicion began to cloud their judgment. The group of survivors in Silent Hill was baffled by the presence of SpongeBob and Patrick. They found it strange to see the cheerful, optimistic characters from SpongeBob SquarePants in such a dark and horrific setting. They were baffled by the contrast between their cheerful demeanor and the grim circumstances they found themselves in. They couldn't understand how such innocent and cheerful characters could survive in the nightmarish landscape of Silent Hill, where darkness loomed around every corner and their very existence was threatened by the malevolent forces of the town. The little girls in the group suddenly get snatched away by a shadowy entity, disappearing into the fog. The other characters are shocked and terrified, realizing the true danger they are in and the fact that no one is safe from the horrors of Silent Hill. They cry out the little girl's name, frantically searching the area for any sign of her, but they find nothing but the eerie silence that blankets the town. Suddenly, they hear a faint, distant cry for help coming from the direction of a nearby abandoned house. Without hesitation, they rush towards the house, praying they can reach the little girl in time to save her from whatever dark forces may be holding her captive. SpongeBob, Patrick, Rose, and another woman made their way through the fog-filled streets of Silent Hill, heading towards the imposing silhouette of a church in the distance. The air was thick with tension, as the group knew that they were entering a place that was steeped in darkness and despair. As they reached the entrance of the church, they could feel the weight of the town's dark energy. The once ornate building now stood ruined and crumbling, its once grand architecture now dilapidated and marred with scars of decay. They exchanged nervous glances before pushing open the creaky wooden doors and entering the eerie, abandoned church. Inside, the once sacred space was now a twisted mockery of its former self. Flickering candles cast an unsettling glow over the ruined interior, and the stench of decay filled the air. As they entered the church, they found themselves alone in the dark, dilapidated building. The only source of light came from a few flickering candles that cast a weak glow over the ruined interior. The air was thick with tension, and the group tried to steady their breathing as they cautiously moved forward. Suddenly, a strange noise echoed through the empty church, filling the air with a sense of unease. They froze in place, silently listening for any sign of movement. The group looked around, their eyes frantically scanning the room for any sign of movement or a source of the noise. Their hearts raced as the tension began to build, the sound becoming more and more ominous. The sound grew louder, reverberating through the empty space, making it difficult to pinpoint its location. The group slowly inched further into the church, their footsteps echoing softly against the damp stone floor. Every step they took only magnified the sense of dread that had settled over them. They found themselves face to face with a cult that was performing an ominous ritual. The cult members were dressed in tattered, dirty robes, their faces hidden by hoods that cast menacing shadows over their eyes. They were gathered around a makeshift altar, their voices chanting in an eerie, dissonant harmony. They watched in horror as the cult members began a ceremony, chanting and summoning some dark force. The group was shaken to their core, realizing that the cult was sacrificing victims to the town in some twisted ritual. They felt a mixture of fear and disgust as they observed the ritual, the chanting growing louder and more intense as sacrificial blood was spilled upon the makeshift altar. As the scene unfolded in the church, the cult members suddenly turned their attention towards Patrick, recognizing his pure soul. They believed he would be the perfect sacrificial offering. Patrick's face paled with fear as he realized what was about to happen. The cult members surrounded him. The ritual was underway. Patrick struggled, but he was quickly overpowered and forced onto the makeshift altar. The other group members were in utter shock and horror, unable to believe what was about to happen. SpongeBob especially was frozen in fear, tears streaming down his face. Patrick was strapped to the makeshift altar, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by pure, unadulterated fear. The cult members held him down, his struggles useless against their strength. His eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for any chance of escape. The air was thick with tension as the ritual continued. The cult leader, a dark, imposing figure, approached Patrick, a knife glinting sinisterly in their hand. "Patrick, please stop. I don't want to die. I'm still young and have so much to live for." SpongeBob whispering in horror, "Hang in there, pal." Squidward watching in shock. "What's happening?" "How can this be real?" Rose voice trembling. "No, not Patrick. You can't do this." Sybil trying to intervene. "Stop this madness. You can't just sacrifice an innocent being." Patrick was faced with a gut-wrenching dilemma as he realized the cult had captured the little girl. Their ultimatum was simple. Either they would burn the little girl, or Patrick would be burned in her place. Patrick's heart ached with the weight of the decision, but his selfless nature took over. He knew he had to make the ultimate sacrifice to save the little girl. With tears streaming down his face, he whispered to the cult leader, "Take me instead." The cult members were caught off guard by Patrick's selflessness, but they nodded in agreement. They released the little girl, and she ran into Patrick's arms, crying and thanking him. Patrick held her, his own grief and fear for her safety replaced by a bittersweet sense of purpose. He gave her a warm smile, knowing that he had done the right thing. Sybil, struggling to hold back tears, Pat, no, please, there has to be another way. Cult leader, with a grim resolve, his sacrifice will please the town. His innocence will open the gate. SpongeBob, tears streaming down his face, no, he can't be gone. Squidward, trying to hide his sadness, life is unfair. This shouldn't be happening. The cult leader held a torch, its flame flickering menacingly in the dimly lit room. The girl was crying in SpongeBob's arms, her tears a mixture of gratitude and horror. The room was eerily silent, the gravity of the situation heavy in the air. SpongeBob's heart was shattered, the memory of his cheerful friend Patrick forever etched in his mind. The girl clung to him, her little body trembling with fear. Squidward stood silently, torn between his usual sardonic facade and a rare moment of vulnerability. The atmosphere was already tense, but it suddenly took a turn for the worse. Pyramid Head, the mysterious and terrifying figure, materialized in the room. His ominous presence sent chills down everyone's spines. SpongeBob watched in horror as Pyramid Head approached the altar. Panic filled the room as the others tried to escape, but it was too late, and Patrick's sacrifice was about to be carried out. The girl clung tightly to SpongeBob, crying and shaking. In the chaos, Sybil found herself cornered by Pyramid Head, unable to escape his deadly attacks. Sybil desperately tried to evade Pyramid Head. The others looked on in horror, their own survival at stake. SpongeBob held the girl tightly, his heart pounding in his chest. Squidward, meanwhile, stood in the corner, silently praying that he wouldn't be next. The room seemed to shrink as the tension grew thicker. Just as the atmosphere seemed to reach its peak of tension, Patrick was sacrificed. SpongeBob watched helplessly as the ritual was carried out. The girl held tightly to SpongeBob's shirt, shaking and sobbing inconsolably. Squidward stood nearby, unable to believe what he was witnessing. Sybil's cries grew weak as she struggled against Pyramid Head's onslaught. The room was heavy with a sense of defeat, as if the very essence of hope had been snuffed out. Just as the situation seemed to reach its darkest point, Sybil's tragic fate was sealed. Her desperate struggle proved futile as Pyramid Head's attack was lethal. SpongeBob held a sobbing girl tightly, his heart shattering at the sight. Squidward stood nearby, speechless and pale, unsure how long he would last. The room grew darker, seeming as if the world's despair was now palpable. With Sybil's death, the room seemed to grow even darker, the air now heavy with the scent of despair. SpongeBob held the girl tightly, their own hope slipping away. Squidward stood frozen, his usual sarcastic facade now shattered as the horror of their situation closed in around them. The atmosphere was thick with grief and hopelessness, as if all that was left was a hollow sense of despair. As horror seemed to swallow them whole, they realized there was no escape from the nightmarish town. They rushed out into the streets of Silent Hill, their feet slapping against the cracked pavement, their hearts racing with fear. The fog was thicker, their visibility even worse, their options even more limited. Every shadow or noise caused them to jump as they desperately looked for a way out of this never-ending nightmare. But with each step, the town seemed to grow darker and more malevolent, as if it was fighting back against their escape. The group moved through the deserted streets, their footsteps echoing off the dilapidated buildings. The streetlights flickered ominously, their glow casting long, grotesque shadows across the road. SpongeBob held the little girl tightly against his chest, her sobs the only sound amongst the eerie, stifling silence. Squidward stumbled along, his usual confident facade shattered, his eyes darting around in paranoid fear. Sybil was gone, her loss weighing heavily on the remaining group. As they ran deeper into the labyrinthine maze of Silent Hill, the atmosphere grew even more oppressive. The air was thick with an almost palpable stench, and the silence was punctuated only by the sound of their own panicked breathing. It was as if the town itself was suffocating them, its malevolence reaching out like tendrils to claim their souls. As the group fled through the desolate streets, they stumbled upon a building that stood out from the rest. It was an old, decrepit structure, its doors swinging open on rusted hinges. They stepped inside, the dim light revealing a room that was strangely intact. In the middle, a large portal appeared, its swirling vortex hinting at a possible escape from the horrors they'd experienced thus far. Could this be their way out of Silent Hill? The group hesitated for a moment, unsure of what the portal held. But the fear of staying in the nightmarish town had overwhelmed them, and they approached the portal cautiously. As they drew closer, the portal seemed to pulse with a faint, eerie energy. This was their only hope of escape, but they knew that the journey would be treacherous and not without its own horrors. As they moved through the treacherous landscape, Pyramid Head made his move. Squidward and Rose were brutally taken by the imposing figure, leaving SpongeBob and the little girl as the only ones left to escape. SpongeBob, now with the added burden of protecting the child, felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. The portal was just within reach, but the path was now even more treacherous than before. Could SpongeBob protect the little girl and find a way to escape Silent Hill? Squidward and Rose taken by Pyramid Head and only himself and the girl left to escape Silent Hill, SpongeBob knew time was running out. He took the little girl's hand, holding it tightly as they stepped closer to the portal. They were mere moments away from possibly escaping this nightmarish world, but their final step was filled with uncertainty. As they stepped through the portal, the world of Silent Hill faded away, leaving them in complete darkness. With a heavy heart, SpongeBob knew the horrors of Silent Hill would haunt him, but he was determined to carry on and protect the girl he had come to love. With a sense of relief and determination, SpongeBob and the little girl finally escaped the nightmare of Silent Hill. As they stepped out of the portal to safety, she was immediately reunited with her family. SpongeBob watched as she ran into her mother's arms, tears of joy streaming down her face. He knew that she would be safe now, free from the horrors that had almost claimed her life. With a heavy heart, he turned his attention to the task that still lay ahead. He vowed to find a way back to Silent Hill to rescue Rose and Squidward from the grasp of Pyramid Head, no matter the cost. SpongeBob finally arrived back in Bikini Bottom, the familiar sights and sounds of his home world a stark contrast to the horrors he had just experienced. The bright colors, cheerful citizens, and carefree atmosphere were a welcome sight, though his heart was still heavy with the memory of the friends he had left behind in Silent Hill. As he walked through the streets of Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob tried to put on a brave face, smiling and waving to familiar faces. But the burden of what he had been through weighed heavily on him, his usual cheerful demeanor now tinged with a quiet sadness. SpongeBob returned to his home on Conch Street, his loyal friend Gary greeting him with concern. The events of Silent Hill still fresh in his mind, he sat in the comfort of his home, the warm, familiar atmosphere like a balm to his troubled soul. He would always remember Patrick's sacrifice and the courage of Sybil and Squidward as he vowed to live on for their sake, hoping to one day find a way to rescue them from the malevolent force that had taken them captive. SpongeBob was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, from the events of Silent Hill. As he settled into his home, Gary, his loyal pet snail, watched him with concern. SpongeBob could sense the worry in Gary's eyes, and knew that his friend could tell something was deeply troubling him. SpongeBob sat silently, his usual cheerfulness replaced by a weary, contemplative expression. He knew he had to take some time to process the horrific events he had faced, and try to make sense of it all. With a heavy heart and weary soul, SpongeBob slumped into a worn armchair, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by a weary, contemplative expression. Silent Hill's horrors weighed on him, and the loss of his friends left a deep mark. He knew he needed to find a way to rescue Rose and Squidward, but at that moment, all he could do was reflect and find solace in the company of his loyal pet Gary, as the shadows of Silent Hill slowly receded, leaving only an aching void